Selecting an element is just the first step. What you want to do is modify the element. So looking in the modify section over here, you can modify different properties that an element node has. So think about when you actually select a particular document node, the node is really an object, and that object has different properties, and you can modify those properties. So now maybe things are coming together for you that when we looked at an object had properties, and what the DOM API is doing, it's representing our entire document object model in node format or an object format, so we can actually modify its properties. So one thing to do is, let's say we can modify the style property that it has. Okay, so if I go over here to our code, move this on the side, and let's see if we just want to modify the header. So we captured the header node in this header variable, and then we can simply now come over here and say header dot style, and then dot, and I can provide whatever CSS property I want to modify. So one of the properties is color, so I can say color is equal to, let's say, red. If I do that, if I save and I put this, let's say, on the side, refresh, and you see this is now red in color. Now let's say if I want to add some padding, right? Or let's say I want to change the font size. So I can come over here and say header dot style dot font dash size is equal to, what is the size? Let's say 200%. Now you know from CSS that when you want to add a particular property, you would write font dash size like such. This is called kebab case because it has dashes. But the difference is that when you are using the DOM API, you're using JavaScript basically. So when you're writing the CSS properties, you actually write it in camel case versus in the kebab case. So you would actually remove this and make it like such. So S capital like such. So save, refresh, and you see this is 200% in size. So this is one way to modify the styles. So now if we inspect this element, right, I'm going to make this big and take a look at our header. Where is it? Here it is. You see over here, the header has this style attribute now with these styles that we just added. If you look at our code over here, our HTML, the header has no attributes. But when we wrote this code, our JavaScript using the DOM API modified our HTML, which was represented over here. It did not change our code is still the same, but it changed what was appearing to the browser. That's why these particular style properties were added, because of our JavaScript code. So let's say if you want to modify in a different way, this is just one of the ways. Another way, because style is just one attribute, there are many other attributes. It's a width attribute, we have disable attributes, we have many other attributes. So another thing we can do is we can use the set attribute method and then provide the name of the attribute and the value of the attribute. Very simple, right? So let's say if we had a button on our page. So I'm going to just go over here and create on the top some kind of button. So I'm going to say button, click me, and I'm going to make it disabled. Disabled is equal to true. Save, refresh, and you see this button is there, but it is disabled. I cannot click it. Let me just zoom in a little bit so it's easier for you to look at. This is not clickable, okay? But if I remove this attribute, it is clickable. You see, I can do that. So actually, let's say if you're making an application and you're creating a pretty complex form or simple form, doesn't matter, and let's say the user forgets to fill out a field, you can actually programmatically disable the button. How would you do that? You would actually use the DOM API. You would first of all query that particular element. So I'm going to say btn is equal to document dot query selector, and then I would provide button over here. So that would capture the button. So that's step number one. And the second step is to modify some property. So I'm going to say this button dot set attribute. And what is the attribute we want to set? We want to set the disabled property, or sorry, attribute. And what is the value? It takes two parameters. One is the name of the attribute, and the second is the value of the attribute. So what do we want to do? True, like such. So now if I save and now refresh, this should be disabled. So I do that, and you see programmatically we have disabled that button. Now, one other thing, let's say your button was already disabled, right? So let's say this has, let's say, a width. So let's just forget that. We'll just say a width of 200 pixels. Save, refresh, and this doesn't become big. Let's see what other property we can use. Maybe we can put an ID, right? Let's say it has an ID. This is not a perfect example in a real use case, but it demonstrates the point. So let's say it has ID of special, all right? Just play with me over here. So let's say we want to remove a particular attribute. We would actually use the remove attribute method, and we can simply come over here and say button dot remove attribute, and then provide the name of the attribute we want to remove. So ID. ID is the name of the attribute, right? That's the attribute we want to remove. So this thing is going to be removed altogether. And now when I save, refresh, it is removed. If I just want to right click and inspect, it will show it to me. So I'm going to look for that and look for our button. Where is it? Here it is. You see the ID is not there. Okay. So these are certain ways to use and modify our document nodes with this API. So you can do much more with it, but this is just an example. Talk to you in the next video.